Well, they're still not back in the courtroom, so I don't know if they're waiting for prime time or what, but we're all on verdict watch right now. So here's a little tape of CNN's Laura Jarrett going over the charges. Okay.
Most important legal phrase in this entire case, substantial causal factor. What does that mean? Well, the jury's been told in order to find Chauvin guilty, they must find his actions were, quote, a substantial causal factor in causing the death of George Floyd. It's a mouthful, but substantial causal factor doesn't mean the only factor here. Remember all that testimony the jury heard about drugs in Floyd's system, clogged arteries. Those can all be contributing factors, and Chauvin can still be guilty if the knee on Floyd's neck was a substantial cause of his death. Now, at the same time, if the jury finds that Chauvin's actions as a police officer were a reasonable use of force, then there is no crime in this case at all. And we heard a lot about that throughout the entire trial.
So that's what I was explaining to you with this case, Graham versus Connor. You can look it up. Just do a Google search for Graham versus Connor, and you will see why this word reasonable man standard, the reasonable use of force, is the only consideration in law when you are trying to deduce if a police officer abused his power over you. Did he reasonably, was he afraid of you? And if he was reasonably in fear for his life, now in this case, there was no reason at all for Derek Chauvin to be afraid for his life. Derek Chauvin was not injured. He didn't even break a nail on this particular arrest, okay? There were 4 police officers, and then we found out there was another police officer across the street. They never even asked for the police officer across the street to come lend a hand because they didn't need any help because they were not in fear for their lives. No one was injured, not any of the 4 officers, not Officer Tao, not Officer King, not Officer Chauvin, none of them. They were not reasonably in fear for even a broken nail, let alone their lives. But that makes you understand, I hope, that the reasonable white man police officer standard is not enough. It's not enough to preserve life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness when you have a broken tailpipe. It's not enough because white police officers or police officers in general have this reasonable, naturally reasonable in their heads fear of superhuman strength of black men. And it's ridiculous. And that is why the George Floyd, I want to say decency and policing, but it's not that. But the George Floyd Policing Act is so important. The legislature of the United States of America needs to legislate the 14th Amendment into these cases. Because right now, the 14th Amendment has no place in these cases. And the 14th Amendment is equal protection. And on the Supreme Court, engraved in the marble wonderland, says equal justice under law. That is the premise for which we all toil. This is the premise behind all jurisprudence in America, all justice in America. And we don't have it even in the basic policing laws. So to that former caller, her name was Cindy, said she was a teacher. Now I'm in fear for our children. Wow, that was the most bizarre conclusion you could possibly reach is, hey, let's start a race war. And that's what she was advocating for there. That's how, listen, I get the frustration, I do. But aren't you able to think your way out of this? Wouldn't you then just say, what is the weakness that we face in getting justice? Where is the portion where everything falls apart? What is the and obviously it is this Graham versus Connor case. That was even, you know how I came upon it? Poor Eric brought it up. Poor Eric brought it up in his defense. And I was like, that's interesting. What is that? Well, the law does not require Derek Chauvin to behave like a human being. The law requires Derek Chauvin to behave like a cop. And apparently, under our law, Behaving like a cop is a lower standard than behaving like a human being. And therein lies the dilemma. Now, I'm pretty sure we're not going to get the verdict before 5 o'clock when this show concludes. Because I'm still looking at the seal of the state of Minnesota, and the judge isn't in the courtroom, and the jury's not in the courtroom, and the lawyers aren't in the courtroom. So it will take all of them assembling, and it will take longer than, 5 minutes for them to assemble. It'll take longer for the judge to, make a statement about how he doesn't want any outbursts during the reading of the verdict, and that the foreman will read the verdict. And so I don't think we're going to get it. I don't think we're going to get it. But I got to tell you that there's a unanimous verdict, and I don't know if it was guilty on it because it was so quick. They either found that George Floyd was murdered and fined Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts, or they acquit on all 3 counts. I'm going to go with Ed, who said one of the smartest things about this. He said he knows that there are people of diverse backgrounds on this jury, and he just doesn't believe there was enough time to make them throw up their hands and say, yeah, it was the crowd, or yeah, it was the tailpipe, okay, or yeah, Chauvin's heart, George Floyd's heart was too big. No, I gotta.
Here's what I thought then was the largest departure from here, the evidence. I'll show it to you. You were told, for example, that Mr. Floyd died because his heart was too big. You heard that testimony.
Yeah.
And now, having seen all the evidence, having heard all the evidence, you know the truth. And the truth of the matter is that the reason George Floyd is dead is because Mr. Chauvin's heart was too small.
I love that. It's concise. It's true. It's ironic. It's just such a great statement. And maybe the jury agreed. Xavier in LA. Xavier in LA.
Hello?
May I help you?
Oh, hey, Randy.
Yes.
What? How you doing?
You called me. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, whoops. No, I just put that little AirPods and stuff like that. Man. So that judge, he can't say anything. He can't say, like, for the greater good of anything. Just shut the whole thing off. You see the whole thing that's going on, and they can't. The judge wanted to attack Maxine Waters.
Yeah, that was pretty bizarre.
Come on, what are you doing?
I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what his strange reaction was related to, but
What?
I don't think when you become a congresswoman you relinquish your First Amendment right. I know that the president of the United States got to say any damn thing he wanted to say about anybody. He could say Mexicans were rapists, Mexicans were murderers. He could actually try for a Muslim ban because all Muslims were terrorists. He could say, there's my African American over there. He could say that the election was rigged over and over again and actually incite violence and an insurrection. And for some strange reason, this particular judge thinks Maxine Waters surrendered her First Amendment right to comment on a video that is so clear-cut that we were watching a murder.
Right. Maxine Waters represents Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles. And for him, I think that guy needs to be disbarred. That judge. Because
No. Well, anyway, the House tried to censure Maxine Waters today. Oh, yeah. These Republicans who wanted to set up the White Anglo-Saxon caucus. Yeah. Gosar, Getz, Green, and Gump, I guess. They wanted to set up a white caucus. It's just so sick. Anyway, it failed. It failed. The vote was 216 to 210 against censuring her. Listen, fingers crossed. I'm praying for you, Minneapolis. I got high hopes here. I really do. Just meet me back here tomorrow. Meet me back here tomorrow. Don't have time to listen to